Hey now Brawlers, today we're going to take a look at Space Hulk from Games Workshop. This is the 4th edition of the game. And obviously there's nothing in this box, otherwise I would not be able to do this with it because it is a heavy game. There's a lot of stuff in there. Now of course the notorious thing about Space Hulk is that it's always been limited edition. Games Workshop, this is based in the Warhammer 40k universe. I guess I'll start at the beginning in case you really don't know what it is. It's a game based in the Warhammer 40k miniatures universe, produced by Games Workshop. This is a encapsulated board game version of that universe, and Games Workshop has made it very limited edition. They released a 3rd edition of it back in like 2009. Sold out on their website very quickly, and the only way you've been able to get it now is by paying like at least $200 more than the $100 original price tag to get it from eBay or from other third-party sellers. And I think it even creeped up higher than that at a certain point. Well, now they announced very, very quickly that they would have a 4th edition of the game, and this has always been a grail game for me, even though I had never played it, so I hurried up and snatched one up as soon as I could. They increased the price to $125, but that is because they actually added some new things for the 4th edition. Most of the components and the story and all that was the same, except that they added a few new missions or scenarios, and some new tiles to go along with those scenarios. And they tweaked a few rules, although not having played the old editions, I'm not entirely sure what they tweaked, so keep that in mind as you watch this. To me, this is all brand new. So I was very, very excited to play this one. This has a very infamous history. This is like one of the quintessential Ameritrash games, so there's a lot of people that do not like it because of that very fact. And also, if you'll look at the ratings for the 3rd edition of Space Hulk, it's still in the top 100 of Board Game Geek, but it would be probably in the top 10 games on there, potentially, except for the fact that Games Workshop pissed off so many people by making Board Game Geek and many other sites take down all of their unofficial fan content over like a copyright dispute. Games Workshop is notorious for guarding their IP very, very heavily. So a lot of people ranked every Games Workshop product on Board Game Geek, especially Space Hulk, with a bunch of 1 ratings in order to drive down the rating and send a protest message to Games Workshop. And a lot of these are people who love the game. So I don't know if that same thing's going to happen with 4th edition, but before I say anything else and give away what I think about the game, let's do a very brief overview because there's a lot of working parts to this. I do not want to spend an hour on this overview, but we'll do that. Then we're going to come back. I'll give you my final opinion. Alright, I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview of Space Hulk, the 4th edition. The reason for that is that there's a lot of little moving parts to this, and there's tons of different missions and scenarios, so I really can't go over everything. So I just want to give you a taste of what it's like. Do not use this as a tutorial at all. So the theme of this game, it takes place in the Warhammer 40k miniatures universe, but this is just a self-contained 2-player version of one of the battles that happens in that game. One player is going to take control of the Space Marines, which is this elite squad of genetically engineered humans in this power armor, and they're going onto this derelict spaceship that's called, they're called Space Hulks, and this one's called the Sin of Damnation, and they're trying to wipe out the Tyranid threat here and recover lost technology, maybe even recover the ship itself. The Tyranids, they're actually called specifically Gene Stealers. They're like xenomorph type, from the movie Alien type creatures who are skulking around through all the ducts and the tunnels and all that. So you breach this ship, and all the different missions go through a different storyline of these Imperial Marines going through the ship. Specifically, they're called the Blood Angels. And each scenario has a different objective. So this objective actually has the Marines starting over there, and the Gene Stealers are going to start off. Well, I'll get to what all these different things are in a minute, but they are going to be trying to prevent, that player is going to try to prevent the Marines from getting into the control room over here, slightly off camera. The goal in this scenario, this is the second one, is for the Marine who's carrying the flamethrower, called a flamer, to make it successfully to that room, and as long as he's got at least 1 charge remaining, he's going to light it on fire. That's the entire goal of the scenario. Other scenarios might be a rescue mission. It might be to rescue an artifact. The very first mission is just to use boarding torpedoes to get onto the ship. So it's going to change every time. Usually it involves the Gene Stealer killing all the Marines or killing a certain amount of them or preventing them from meeting their goal, whereas the Marines the impetus is on the Marines to finish whatever they're their goal is. So let's take a look at some of these miniatures first. These obviously are unpainted, which I do apologize for, but I just do not have the time or the skill to paint at this very moment. So let me just get this in focus and give you a better look at some of them at least. All these are really cool, and some of these are special. Like I believe this one is like the Brood Lord for the Gene Stealers, but I haven't gotten to this scenario yet. So really, really intricate. This is actually one of the special scenario objectives. So you find a dead Space Marine sitting there, and he's got an artifact with him. But again, I haven't really gotten to that scenario yet, and so I'll just show you a few of these. This is like one of the basic drones. And then for the Marines, there's not as many of them, but they all have really cool weapons and stuff. This is like one of the sergeants with a shield and a thunder hammer. This guy's got a bolt gun. Oh, let's see. This guy's got cool claws, which I almost broke when I was taking him off the sprues. Let me show you the guy with the flamer. This is the guy. So, and that's really the only way that you can tell them apart when a scenario will tell you specifically what Marines you use. So he'll say the Marine with the flamer and the power fist, and that's the only way you tell them apart. So once you have everything set up, and obviously all these tiles come apart, and you have to make them, they're modular, they'll be put together in different ways for each scenario. You've got doors and such like that, and you've got your little dashboard area over here. Once you have everything here set up, then the game's going to begin. Now the first player to go are the Marine player, and the first thing they're going to do after they put their troops out on the board is do their control tokens. Now control tokens are a way for you to get extra points. This whole game is based on points. You use points to move, you use points to do any other actions, just to turn around if you're the Space Marines, and so on. And the Space Marines have a lot less points. I believe it's, if I remember correctly, it's 4 points for each of your Space Marines on your turn, which 1 point to move, 1 point to turn, 1 point to act, whereas the Gene Stealers get 6 points each because they're extremely fast. So that's why it's important to have your command points. I say control points, I meant command points. So you have a stack of 6. They're numbered from 1 through 6. And you're going to draw one. You should have like a little bag. I'm probably going to get one of those. But you'll shuffle them up and draw one at the start of your turn. And only you get to look at what it is. So if it was this one here, that's a 2. Now, as long as there's a sergeant who's alive in your faction, you can actually redraw this as well, but you're stuck with the second one. Whatever you decide to do, you're going to put that. Actually, I have one here over here already. You're going to put that on the 0 spot of the board tracker over there. Those are extra points for you to use whenever you want to, even during the other player's turn, the Gene Stealer player's turn. But you have to be honest about it. You can always pick that up and look to remind yourself of how many points you have. But if you accidentally go over the threshold, at the end of the round, the Gene Stealer player is going to look to see if you were honest about it. If you weren't, you automatically lose. Anyways, once you have that, then comes the fun part. Your turn is going to begin. But as a Marine player, you have a harder time because you are just humans. You're genetically engineered humans, but you're still just humans. So your reflexes are not as fast as the Gene Stealers, which means you're on a timer. When it's your turn, you have to flip that timer over, and now you take your turn as fast as you can. You have 4 points per Marine, and you have to use them before the timer runs out. Timer runs out, you are done. The Gene Stealer player does not have that limitation. He can take as much time as he wants, he or she. So let's assume I'm just going through the turn, and I'm just going to ignore the timer. It's frantic enough to do this and keep track of time as it is. So you use movement points. You can open doors. You can move in. And facing is important in this game. Wherever their head is facing, that's where they can actually target. And why that's so important is that you actually have to use a point just to move and turn sideways. So if I wanted to go here, I'd go 1, 2, 3, and then if I wanted to face this corridor, I'd have to spend a point just to turn. And then I can do this for all of my different Marines. You can't go through Marines, and you can't stop in their space, so it can be tough. You can get bottlenecked very easily in these narrow passageways. One really cool thing that you can do is you can put someone on Overwatch for 2 action points. You put this little marker next to them, and that means that when it's a Gene Stealer player's turn, if they move units into range of the weapon of that, which is pretty much anything, as long as they're in line of sight of someone, a Marine with a Storm Bolter, which is the normal hand weapon, the pistol weapon, you can just take automatic shots at the Gene Stealers. The way it works for most weapons, let's say it's a Storm Bolter, you're going to roll 2 dice and hope to get a 6 on one of those dice. If you sustaining fire, which means that you keep firing over and over again, like when you're in Overwatch mode, you actually can hit on a 5 on those dice. Now, There's a lot of other little things too, like for instance the flamer I mentioned before, which is important for this particular scenario. You can drop a whole bomb of fire in a hallway and just mercilessly slaughter them, but you only have limited shots with that. You also have someone with a chain gun, which also has limited shots, which you'll keep track of up here. This is the round marker. And that's really what the Marine player is going to do. It's going to keep moving around, deciding whether to shoot, which takes action points, deciding whether to move, put yourself in Overwatch, and so on. Now, the Gene Stealers, a little bit different. The only models, quote-unquote, they start off with at first are blips. Depending on the scenario, the Gene Stealer player is going to draw a certain amount of blips, and during the end of his turn, he may actually get reinforcements, which is more blips coming out, which they'll come out in these areas marked with the purple arrows. Blips can have numbers on the other side from 1 to 3, but only the Gene Stealer player can see what those are. And he's going to drop those in rooms that are out of sight at the beginning of the scenario from the Marines. But either voluntarily or involuntarily, if a Marine catches sight of them, for instance, if this door was open, you'll immediately take that blip out and put however many Gene Stealers were indicated on the other side out there. So I can't remember. I think that one was a 1, but let's just say it was 3. You'll just stack them up, and if it was voluntary, you get to choose where they go. If it was involuntary, the Marines would get to choose where they go, but it still has to be kind of adjacent to that same area. You can't just put them all the way down the hallway. So then the Gene Stealers can take the rest of their turn. Now, the Gene Stealers are all melee, but they have mostly the same rules, except that it's much easier for them to maneuver. They get to actually turn 90 degrees as part of one of the moves that they're already doing. So they spend a point to move, and then they get to turn as they're doing it. So they're much more maneuverable. They can actually move backwards, whereas the Marines can't without having to turn first. And they're just going to run up and try to slaughter the Marines in the same way by rolling dice and trying to get 6s. But there's so many of them, and they're so fast, and they get so many points that it's much easier for them to do it. Other little things. Let's see. Like I said, you have the scenario goal, which usually changes depending on whatever mission it is. In this case, it's just trying to drop a bomb, get the guy with the flamer all the way there, and drop the bomb there as long as he has at least 1 charge left. I'm trying to think of other really important things I should mention now without getting too overwhelmed. But that's really how the turns are going to go. So you have the Marine phase, which is, on a timer, using your command points, using your points, setting your guys in Overwatch if necessary. Then you're going to have the Gene Stealers who are moving around their blips, possibly getting more blips, revealing themselves, trying to attack the Marines, keep them from meeting their specific goal. That really is Space Hulk. Before I get into the gameplay of Space Hulk and what I really think about it, let's start with the components. You kind of have to for a game like this because that's where most of the money is going towards for such an expensive game. And I think that this is the one area that is completely unimpeachable by anyone. These components are magnificent. Games Workshop has a reputation for having the finest looking models, miniature models of all time ever. And not ever being a Warhammer player, only playing some Fantasy Flight games set in the Warhammer universe, which had Fantasy Flight quality, which is good but not that good, I didn't know firsthand what miniatures could really look like. These are awesome, and chances are current Games Workshop miniatures for the actual miniatures game look even better than this, but these are fantastic. So those are awesome, but even more impressive to me as a board gamer, first and foremost, were the tiles, which were made of this super heavy, thick cardboard stock that is just amazing. And not only that, I pull out the tiles and I'm kind of feeling them, and I'm like, wow, these are all damaged. There's all these divots in them. Before realizing that those were supposed to be there as representing battle damage and actual terrain things on the board that don't have any effect on gameplay but are just super cool. It just makes it, I don't know, it's so amazing the way that they did that. And the rule books look really good. People that I played this with, I played with a couple different people, were a little upset. They thought that the rules weren't really laid out very, very well. I actually thought they were fine. I mean, I guess I'm used to reading really bad rule books, so to me this wasn't so bad, but man, this game needs reference sheets bad. Really bad. And because you can't go online and download one anymore because of Games Workshop, sending the hounds after you, you kind of have to make your own, and I do recommend that. I'll be making my own very, very soon because Especially for the Space Marine player, I'm going to get into this with gameplay, you have such a limited amount of time, you need to easily be able to reference things if you're new to the game. So there is that, but everything else component-wise looks really, really good. All the tokens and the artwork in the books, man, just amazing. I don't think anyone could, even if it's not your style. Like, you might say, I'm not into dark sci-fi fantasy, and to me, I prefer, or science fiction, and to me, I prefer fantasy. But even if it's not your style, you gotta give it to them component quality wise. Let's talk about the gameplay. What I'm going to say first is that my first experience with this game was negative. It was negative in the regard that I had read the rulebook previously, and it seemed really awesome to me. Right? I read the rulebook and the mission book. Well, I read the rulebook from front to back and read parts of the mission book. I didn't want to spoil too much for myself. And I was amazed. I thought, oh, there's so many cool things here. Like, okay, it looks kind of like a dungeon crawl that I've seen many, many times already. Although you could give it to Space Hulk for originally coming out back in the 80s, which probably inspired a lot of these Descent-like games. But I was like, okay, there's nothing too new here. But then there was really cool aspects like the timer for the Space Marines and the fact that the Gene Stealers and the whole blip system and how the turning works for the Marines. All these neat little things seem so very thematic. And I was very excited to try all of them. I mean, as I was reading the Blue Book, I was just getting more and more. I was frothing at the mouth. And when it actually got down in time to play it, setup takes a long time. You're not going to get around that. And even in the first few scenarios that I played, it was a long time, and it's going to get even more complicated, was the idea that I got from flipping ahead to other missions and more little moving parts to worry about. So there's that. So I wasn't really prepared for how much setup time there was going to be, having already spent a ton of time assembling the miniatures, which is another thing I should mention. You will spend a lot of time putting these miniatures together. But then getting into the actual gameplay, they do ease you into it. That very first scenario, you get a couple breaks. There's no timer for the first couple rounds of play for the Space Marines, and everything just goes at a good pace. Once that timer kicks in, and the overwhelming amount of little tiny details, which, it's not a very complicated game, but the first time you play through it, there's so many little things you have to keep track of how movement works, how your weapons are going to work, different numbers and stats, together with the timer, can feel very overwhelming. And even though I never ran out of time when I was playing it, I was making really, really horrible decisions as a Space Marines. That's who I played as the first time that I did it. And I thought, well, it's introductory scenario, how hard could it be? I got decimated. Things seemed okay at first, and I was quickly destroyed. Completely, no prayer, no hope whatsoever. It ended on like round 5 or something like that. It was terrible. And I was very demoralized by that. I was like, okay, I don't expect to win. I don't really care if I win, but I thought I could show up. And then after that, I was like, oh man, did I get a game I'm not really going to like that much? I started thinking about it. I was like, man, if I had done this instead, if I'd been more defensive, if I'd set this guy on Overwatch, if I had done all these little things and strategized just a little bit better, I would have had a much better game. So I came back to the table with someone else, new player, which I probably shouldn't have done because I wanted to have the experience of both people knowing what was going on. But I had a much better experience the second time doing the same mission. We started right back from the beachhead mission again because now I knew what to expect. I knew, I fully realized what it meant to not be able to just run up there with your Space Marine and start shooting at something. You have to run up there, turn again, aim, go into Overwatch potentially, or use command points to go even further, which are a very precious limited quantity. These are all the things you are just not going to get right off the bat. So the game has a steep learning curve, even though it's a relatively straightforward game. But once you get over that, this game is awesome. It really, really is. What it comes down to is theme. The theme is so tightly integrated to the mechanics of this game. Even if you're not a huge fan of Warhammer, and I'm not. I kind of like the world, but it's always been too depressing for me. But even if you're not, the idea of these Marines going into this derelict ship and hunting down these xenomorph-type aliens, the Gene Stealers, and this claustrophobic feeling of not having all the action points that you need to do and being swarmed in at all sides, or like in the second scenario, having to, either the second or third, running down this tunnel and trying to get there and knowing that you're going to lose troopers, but it doesn't matter. You've got to get there and you've got to destroy that control room. Every mission is different. Every mission offers something that you're trying to do. And is it balanced? Absolutely not. That's another thing. And it's another thing that led to me liking the game more, is when I gave up the idea that the game was supposed to be balanced and that you had control at all times. So I think that looking ahead, some missions are balanced on one side or the other on purpose, but there are some times where I think the Marines are just screwed. But that's kind of okay. This is a story. This is one of the few games where I really think that I'm playing through a story, and it's not because I'm just reading parts of story off of a card. This is an experience mixed with a very good game. Are the mechanics the best ever? Probably not, because I think that over time, since the game was originally released at first edition, even though they've been updating it, there's other games that probably do what some of these elements are better. Like Descent probably has tighter dungeon crawling mechanics and those kind of things. But what this game offers as a complete package, as a story and as a tense two-player, just head-to-head trying to outwit your opponent, it just can't be beat. I don't know that I've played a game like this. It's such a unique experience for being such an older game, even though it is a revamped edition. Little neat things like the fact that the Space Marines are on a timer. That seemed very weird to me at first, but then I was like, no, that's really, really cool and thematic, and it makes total sense. And it takes away some of the edge that the Space Marines would have otherwise of just being able to shoot from range. That's the serious drawback the Gene Stealers have, is having to run up and hit you. And that timer makes it more difficult for the Space Marines to plot out how they're going to aim their gun and where they're going to, whether they're going to overwatch or not, how they defend themselves. The idea of the command points and having to keep track of those, of having these awesome guns that have limited ammo. The whole Overwatch mechanic is really, really cool, although it doesn't always save you when you want it to. The idea with the Gene Stealers, I mentioned earlier, with the blips, it gives it more of that Alien feel, like the movie Alien, where you know that they're out there, but how many are out there? And it's the whole bluffing thing of maybe he puts one of his 3 tokens here, or maybe this is a 3 token here, but maybe this is a 1 over here. You don't know. I mean, it's just neat. It's just a very neat game. Like I said, it's not for everyone. This is quintessential Ameritrash. Lucky as all get out. You have to hope as a Space Marine that the dice are in your favor, because otherwise you will just get it. It will hasten your demise for sure. And just moving miniatures around, it can sometimes feel a little slow paced, but when you get down into the heat of combat, when you're getting to the edge of defeat, whatever side that you're on, I mean, I prefer playing the Space Marines. I've only played as the Gene Stealers once, but to me, the desperation and just pure adrenaline that you feel as trying to win as the Space Marines feels much better to me. I don't know how I'll feel as I go through each of the different missions, but I can't wait to find out. Really awesome game. This is definitely, I don't know where it would fall on a top 100 games list. Definitely my top 50 for sure. Really, really fun. Better than I could have expected, thinking that I had just bought a box of expensive, nice-looking plastic. But there's a good game to be had here, and I think it definitely lives up to a lot of the hype that surrounds it. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.